There were three basic causes of the French Revolution, and the first was the worsening financial condition of the government that resulted in a desperate need for more money. The reason France was nearly broke was because it had spent huge sums on soldiers and weapons to fight a conflict called the 7 Years' War. The North American branch of this European war is called the French and Indian War, and it was because of this struggle that France was forced to give up its vast and valuable territory, called New France, to Spain and Great Britain. This enormous loss included not only a huge part of Canada, but also such far-flung places as the city of New Orleans in today's state of Louisiana, and big military and fur trading outposts such as Fort de Chartres in Illinois, Fort Condé in Alabama, and Fort Michilimackinac in Michigan. A huge financial drain was placed on the French government a second time a few years later, when her troops returned to North America in 1778 to provide essential military support to the American colonists to help fight their common enemy, Great Britain, during the Revolutionary War. But France's financial crisis did not stem from military expenses alone, because the king, his family, and many other members of the nobility were consuming unbelievable amounts of the country's wealth just to maintain their luxurious lifestyles and enormous palaces. As a result, by the late 1780s, the government of France, Europe's most populous nation, had borrowed so heavily it was almost bankrupt. But the king had decided spending could not be cut, and he wanted to increase taxes. This was a big problem due to the fact that for purposes of taxation, the 26 million citizens of France had been legally divided into groups called the Three Estates. The first estate was made up of the non-tax-paying clergy of the Catholic Church, France's largest landowner. The second estate was made up of the nobility, the richest and most powerful citizens, whose birthrights exempted them from paying taxes and gave them many other special rights and privileges as well. The only taxpayers in France belonged to the third estate, made up of everyone who was not a member of the first two estates, including all of France's poorest citizens. And perhaps more than anything else, it was the tremendous unfairness of these tax laws that led to the outbreak of the French Revolution. However, besides the crisis over taxation, a second cause of the French Revolution was that the 1770s and 1780s were times of severe economic depression in France, when downturns in manufacturing and trade were coupled with many years of poor agricultural harvests. As a result, at that time, most French incomes were shrinking, as serious shortages were driving up the price of basic foods. That was why by the year 1789, both lack of work and hunger were real problems across much of the French nation. In addition to the economic depression and the lack of government money that plagued France in the 1780s, a third important cause of the French Revolution were certain revolutionary new ideas that were coming out of a movement called the Enlightenment. These were many of the same ideas that had inspired the framers of the Constitution of the United States. The Enlightenment movement, also known as the Age of Reason, developed in Great Britain and France during the 17th and 18th centuries. This movement promoted the use of scientific reasoning as the best way to solve problems, as opposed to depending on faith alone. But the Enlightenment idea that inspired the leaders of the French Revolution the most was that ordinary people should be free to elect the leaders of their governments. This was a totally different idea from the commonly held belief in the divine right of kings, the notion that only members of certain families were fit to rule nations because God had specially chosen them to do so.